name is Kat Huang. I'm a teaching artist here for Art Prof, and I'm joined today by Prof. Lieu, who's back from her move. Today, we are talking about why you should be a well-rounded artist. If you want to nerd out about art, Art Prof has everything you need, from tutorials to critiques to a community of fellow art nerds. So Clara, we're getting a lot of questions about what it means to be a well-rounded artist and why one should be a well-rounded artist. So I was wondering if you had an experience where knowing something else really helped you in your artistic practice.
Definitely in terms of getting teaching jobs, because if you only know how to do drawing and no other media, you can only apply for drawing positions. And I was very lucky in that I have experience in a lot of areas. So at RISD, I taught in illustration and printmaking and painting and foundation studies. I mean, that's 4 times the number of teaching jobs that I'm eligible for. And I didn't plan it that way. It was sort of an accident that I ended up doing all these different things. But I guess being a well-rounded artist to me is being willing to try a lot of things, even if they seem really unrelated to what you ultimately want to do. Because Kat, you have a focus. Like if you were to describe what your artistic focus, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, it would be 2D comic work. That is my focus. But of course, I agree with you. I've done a lot of different things in order to get to this one path. And everything I've done has informed everything that I do now. Can you give another example of something else that you've done that really informs your artistic practice? Because other than teaching, I'm sure that your work has also benefited from this.
Absolutely. I mean, I think a big part of it is that you discover something that maybe you had no idea you had interest in. For example, when I was a freshman in art school, I was actually really annoyed that I had to take a 3D design class. And actually, this is a project that you did in a 3D design class in art school. And I was like, oh, I'm a figurative oil painter. 3D doesn't matter. This is so dumb. And I ended up loving my 3D design class. I loved it so much that I ended up doing a master's degree in sculpture. And I would never have done that if I had not taken that 3D class. So again, you're a 2D artist, but you made this 3-dimensional instrument. Why was this maybe a good experience for you?
I think it was a good experience just to think out of the box and also meet other people who are also making this kind of thing. And it kind of led me to realize that even though I love narratives, I love creating stories about different people and different experiences, this kind of thinking was also very informative in terms of just like, I don't know, just stretching my brain muscles and also meeting these people who also love these things and having that inform my narratives later as well. So this particular instrument is a lyre. And I don't know if people can tell, but it's supposed to be a cat, but I made it so that it's harder to tell. I didn't want it to be like obviously a cat, but basically if you hold it on your lap and you play the lyre, it's like you're petting the cat. So it's just kind of cool because I think a lot of my interests and a lot of my, I don't know, illustration way of thinking also informed my 3D work. And so I don't feel like other people have seen this like cat lyre before. So in a way, I've also contributed to the world of 3D.
I think it's awesome. I mean, it's such a cool piece. And I imagine you probably learned a lot about craftsmanship, because this is not the type of project you can do a sloppy job on. It generally looks really bad. So there's usually a lot of best practices that you learn that become more visible in a 3D project, because you can have a drawing that's sort of sloppy looking and you can get away with it. But when you're making something out of wood, that is really not the case so much. Absolutely. We have a comment here from Ethereal. Do art schools in the US prefer students who can do a little bit of everything, or do they prefer an artist who is exceptional at one medium? Kat, why don't you take that question?
I feel most people like students of the former, of people who can do a little bit of everything. But don't let it stop you from really loving one medium. Just don't be unwilling to try other subjects.
And sometimes you'll discover, you know what? I did not like that. I never want to do that again. I mean, I don't know what you feel about this project, Kat, but this would not be my cup of tea. What was this project?
Oh my gosh. This is definitely not my cup of tea either, but I happened to do like a pretty good job on it because I was collaborating with the group. But it was an assignment in my freshman year at art school, and the assignment was so vague. It was just do a performance piece. And my group was like, what does that mean? That could be any, okay, fine, let's try. And so we came up with this idea and we titled it Lost in Translation. Basically, everyone in this lineup is blindfolded except for the person at the end of the line. And the end of the line person will draw on the back of the person in front of them, et cetera, until they could draw onto the board. And it was a good experience, I'd say, but it made me learn that I didn't like performance art.
And that's totally fine. I think that part of being an artist is figuring out what really does not work for you. I think that's actually sometimes even more important, because I've definitely had students in art school who come in and they're like, oh, I really want to do graphic design. And then they take a graphic design course and they're like, whoa, that is not what I thought graphic design was. I actually think I'm a lot better fit for animation. And so a lot of it is just seeing what's out there, because when I went to art school, before that, I had no idea what editorial illustration was. Like, if you asked me what that was, I had no clue. I didn't even know what industrial design was. And so a big part of understanding all of this stuff is just knowing what's available. I mean, before art school, do you feel like you had a sense of what was out there?
No, absolutely not. I think before art school, I would have died rather than touched a saw. And then here I was in art school and I had to do everything, like the drill press, the saw. But I think also something about trying new mediums is that you develop this bravery. You start to be like, yeah, I can do it if I'm willing to do it. And I think that was a breakthrough that I felt when I was doing woodworking, especially because I never thought I would do that ever in my life.
I mean, I look at your cat liar and I feel like I want to have a heart attack in terms of making something like that. To me, I'm so intimidated. And so you probably feel a little bit more empowered than I do. This is a great comment from Eunice. I think when you're a well-rounded artist, that can also make you better at a certain area of art that you want to focus on. That was definitely true for me, because I was a figurative painter for a really long time. And you know what? When I studied figurative sculpture, I really understood the anatomy and the figure a lot better. And now I don't think about myself as a sculptor, really. I do sculpture, but it's more like a supplement to what I typically do. Now, Kat, we're going to look at a couple of these charcoal drawings that you did. And I think stylistically, if we go back and we look at some of your comics work, whoa, this seems like it's done by a different person. And so why would this experience be necessary?
Because you really need to have foundational drawing skills before you actually attempt any other kind of drawing. And since I know a lot of my work is cartoonish and it's 2D work, et cetera, but I really had to have a good basis for that. Like, I needed to know how to portray space. I needed to know values. I needed to know color. I needed to know anatomy in order to have good cartoons produced from that. All of these drawings, Clara, were in your class.
And I remember, Kat, this drawing we're looking at, I told you you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because you came to me like the day before it was due and you're like, I have this idea. I was like, you're not going to make it happen. And then you did it. It's so cool that you actually pulled it off, because that rarely happens when things are happening at the very last minute. ComCuke is saying art school, at least typically, forces you to explore a lot of mediums. Even if you don't like that medium, it informs you how to approach your preferred mediums. I mean, to me, being fluent in another media, it's like being bilingual. Like, why would you not want to have another language? And by the way, speaking of being a well-rounded artist, Kat speaks fluent French. I mean, how does that inform you as an artist?
Well, I think French was such a useful language to learn because it has lots of roots in art, or at least the fine art that is taught in art schools. There's a lot of art out there. It's not just French, guys. Like, there's a lot of cultures and a lot of arts out there. But because I could speak French, whenever I went to museums in France, I was able to understand more. I was able to speak to people more. I was able to learn more. And ultimately, even though you think, oh, this isn't an art related thing, how is it going to inform my art? It will. Like, ultimately, if you're a well rounded artist, you're also a well rounded person.
Yeah, and I would say that I think it's a mistake to focus too much early on. For
Mhm.
example, I was teaching at School and Museum of Fine Arts many, many years ago, and we had these end of the semester review boards where a student would come and they would show all their work from the semester, and then we would give them advice about what to take in the following semester. And I had this one student, they were first year, they had only been at the school for one semester, and they said to me, oh, I'm taking 5 photo classes next semester. And I said to them, that's ridiculous. You got to try something else. And they were like, well, but I really want to focus on photography. So I need to take as much photography as I want. So, Kat, if somebody's wanting to be a photographer, why do you think they should try a drawing class?
Because ultimately it will inform your photography. Like, I have an example of that. Towards my later years of art school, I thought, oh, I'm probably just going to focus on illustration, like, because I'm going to graduate soon. Why would I focus on anything else? And I mean, fortunately, unfortunately, maybe I didn't have enough credits to pass if I didn't take something outside of illustration. So I was forced to take a painting class. I know that might still be related to illustration, but it was a really abstract painting class, and also a jewelry and metalsmithing class. So when I took those classes, I was like, God, I need to do illustration now. But actually, what it helped me do was I met some awesome professors through those classes. Like, they totally do a different medium than I do, but I just think it's so cool to look at their work and just see how it would inform my drawing work. And I also met some cool classmates too. I also made some really nice jewelry from that class. So actually, I think it also helped me not, how do I say this, burn out in my 2D illustration work. Like, really having another thing on hand ready to go is also work, but it's also work that will inform your main focus. Clara, is there another class that you have taken that really informed your 2D or sculptural work? Something that's totally not the normal medium that you usually do.
My sophomore year, I took a stained glass class just for fun. I know,
Wow.
isn't that so weird?
I don't think
And the
that was
thing is,
offered when I was a student. That sounds so cool.
oh, it was so cool. And you know what ended up doing is I got so into it. And actually, it really served a purpose because that particular semester was my first semester in the painting department.
Mhm.
And I knew at the time that I wanted to focus on oil painting. And I started realizing, I like my stained glass class more than my painting class. And I thought, this is a problem because painting's supposed to be my major. And I literally spent my whole semester just focusing on the stained glass. And I never did stained glass ever again. But it was a real wake up call that the painting department was not a good fit for me. And that's
Mhm.
ultimately why I decided to go into illustration.
Mhm.
And so I thought that was great to have that experience. Satan Takes Me says, any tips on being more well rounded for self taught artists? I find it hard to branch out without the structure of school. What do you think, Kat?
That's a really good question. I'd say, first of all, try different mediums, but also you got to do some research before you just dive into woodworking, or maybe even oil painting needs its research beforehand. I'd also say look at the people around you as well. Like, Clara and I both have friends who aren't artists, and these people inform our art. For instance, my comic that's called Mama Bruja is about a Mexican American family. I didn't come up with that story just by sitting by myself alone in a room. No, I actually had a roommate who was Mexican who could tell me stories about their family. And so even though you might think, oh, well-rounded artist means different art mediums. No, well-rounded artist could also mean just different ideas, different ways of thinking, looking at the community and seeing like, how do I contribute to this? And what do I want to say? Things like that.
Well, I think you guys, it's not a mistake that everybody at Art Prof does something really different. I mean, I look at what Jordan does, I look at what Kat does, and it has nothing to, well, it's not that it has nothing to do with what I'm doing, but I don't work digitally, I don't do comics, but I learn a lot from talking to everybody on staff about what they enjoy doing. Like Kat, we did that digital illustration tutorial a ways back, and I literally said to you, Kat, I know nothing about digital painting. And I had so much fun listening to you walk me through all of those things. And if I just hired 5 artists who are just like me, I would never have that experience. Mm-hmm. And I think for you also, maybe just explaining to somebody who's clueless probably made you realize how in depth what you do with digital illustration is. Or am I imposing that idea on you?
No, I absolutely agree. I thought that this was like easy knowledge, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna pick it up, I'm gonna teach Clara a little bit and I'm out of my way. But having to explain everything to you, step-by-step process, made me realize that there is a lot of depth to what I was doing. I just had to step back and see that. And we just had a lot of fun doing this tutorial. Like, we had a lot of laughs. We had a lot of stories shared. It was fun. It was a good time.
Also, I don't know if you guys know, but I'm in the illustration. This is not the final version. This is the final version, but I'm in the corner wearing a red shirt and my 2 little kids are grubs. And one of them is wearing a polka dotted diaper. I just love that moment. We have a question from Blue Will Spirit. What about well-rounded with respect to soft skills that help to increase your chances of employment? What do you think?
Wow, I feel like being well-rounded in different soft skills is going to help your chances of employment, whether you're an artist or not, whether you're a person. Even if you are an artist and you study one discipline or multiple disciplines, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to end up working in that discipline. You're sort of just going to take what life gives you and you're going to have to work with it. When I just got out of art school, Clara highly recommended I try finding a job involving French, just because that would really increase my chances and really increase my choice. And ultimately, these soft skills will help you whether you're an artist or just a person. What do you think, Clara?
For sure. I mean, I really intensely regretted not learning Chinese better because I went to China twice to teach all these workshops. And I just was kicking myself later that I didn't try harder to learn Chinese. So I guess I had the opposite, where I was just annoyed that I never bothered to do that. We have a question from Emma. How can we be good at all mediums when you're good at only one of them? It's difficult. That is hard because if you spend time experimenting and trying different stuff, it takes away from time when you could be focusing on what you really want to be working on. Like, Kat, these are some sketches from your comics, but if you're busy making jewelry, you're not working on your comics. So what do you think about that balance?
I think it's also, I just want to point out, it's interesting to say good at a medium because, yeah, it does take time and skill to develop good skills in your medium. But I think also as a person, you might have a different take on a medium that you didn't think of before. Because this is something I really learned in jewelry and metalsmithing. I thought, oh, okay, there's a technique. I have to follow it step by step. I have to do it often, practice, and then I'll get good at it. But then I was in class with one of my actual jewelry and metalsmithing friends. Like, that was the major. And I was like, Hannah, please help me. Like, I don't know how to do this, like, technique. You got to help me. And then Hannah was like, just wing it. Like, here, I got this, like, scrappy way of doing it. And then you can just finish it on your own. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So it's not really time and skill. Like, that is involved, but it's also, I guess, experimentation and just thinking outside of the box and sort of being the person you are. Because my friend Hannah, I'm sure that she's like a really experimental person. And the way she handled that problem was really different from how I handled it. So when you say you're good at metalsmithing and jewelry and things like that, yeah, there are baseline skills, but there are also some things that only you can think of. So good could also just mean unique, like how you perform this with this medium.
I will say, though, there is a reality
Mhm.
to the limits of what you actually can do. Because, Kat, I'm sure you have logged so many hours doing sketching. And actually, I think probably where you've logged maybe the most hours is your inking practice. I
Hmm.
mean, when I think about all the comics that you've done, you must have done so much time with this quill pen in a way that I think your average person does not. But I think the thing is, you have to decide what works better for you. For example, I really am more a jack of all trades. I do a lot of different stuff. And honestly, I never know what I'm going to do next. I just have an idea and I look at it and I end up telling myself, okay, what would work best to show this particular idea? I never know in advance exactly what I'm going to be doing, but I can do that because I have different experiences in media. However, I will never be a master of lithography, ever.
Mhm.
It's not going to happen. And I will never be as skilled of an oil painter as some of my colleagues. And you have to decide if you're okay with that or not. I don't care because I have other things that I really am more interested in.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, 10,000 Crows, for your super chat. We always appreciate your support. As you guys know, Art Prof relies entirely on donations, and all of our content is 100% free. Ethereal is asking, does it hurt if your website or portfolio shows you as a well-rounded artist, or do commissioners prefer for an artist to stick to one field? What do you think, Kat?
Unfortunately, I feel it is better to have a focus in your portfolio, especially if you're gunning for one certain job or something like that. But it doesn't mean you can't experiment in other things. It's just the way you present your portfolio is really curated for a very specific thing, or maybe specific two things at most. And yeah, I feel like that is what most people are looking for when they're trying to commission something from you.
I mean, some people will even have two separate websites. They'll say, well, I have a graphic design practice, but I'm actually a fine artist at the same time. And so that separation, I actually think is pretty important to have because it's true. I mean, if you guys look at the range of work we're showing you guys here, if I applied with these drawings and I put them in the same portfolio as these drawings, people don't really know what they're going to get. So it's not that you are not a well-rounded artist, it's just you figure out what to present in what context. Blue Will Spirit is saying, can it free you to go outside your usual medium because you have lowered expectations of your performance?
Yeah. I feel like once you go out of your medium, you're like, fuck, it doesn't matter if I do well or not. I'm just going to do whatever I can. I'm just going to try my best, whatever my best can be. And I think that was a lot of my mindset when going to jewelry and metalsmithing and also woodworking. I was like, let us try. Whatever happens, happens. I'm going to learn.
Yeah, and I do think that a lot of us do feel that pressure. For example, out of everything that I do, I'm probably best known for my drawings. And so when I draw, I do feel that, Clara, this is your thing. You really need to perform. However, I have definitely been in situations, for example, my weakest area out of everything I do is probably sculpture. I know enough, but oh my gosh, I have friends who are so good at casting. I just feel like a total moron when I talk to them. But at the same time, I go, I'm not a sculptor, whatever. Okay, eventually this is going to lead to drawing, and who really cares? It's really not a big problem. Vincent is asking, I have a question about your portraits. What kind of paper did you use, and how did you manage the duration of the crumpled quality effect of your work? Well, these drawings that I'm showing you guys here, they were really hard to do because the tissue paper I used was so thin. And actually, the reason why they're torn is because I tore it by accident. Like I was drawing and I erased it and I went, oh my God, it ripped. What do I do? And so eventually I said, you know what, if it wants to rip, let me just let it rip. And I ended up just keeping the rips and it was fine. And so I also think that being a well-rounded artist also has to do with materials, that you have to be willing to try something other than drawing paper to work on, because the surface really makes a difference in terms of how your drawing comes out. And Kat, I know for you, you obviously have a lot of experience in drawing, but the thing is, you're also really good with different areas. Like, for example, if I go back here, this drawing is a soft pastel drawing, but this drawing is a crayon drawing. And some people might say, oh, that's really similar, but you probably felt the difference, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's very different mediums. And also the way to prepare doing these mediums are very different. So for the soft pastel drawing, I had to do it on just a normal piece of paper that was toned. But then on the crayon drawing, I actually had to buy, was it Bristol? It's not Bristol. Masonite?
Masonite.
Yeah. I had to buy Masonite. I had to spray paint it black. I had to sand it down so it was smooth. And then I proceeded to draw on it. And I think the reason why I wanted to do these crayons, like, Clara, this was for your class. It was not required to do these crayons, but I wanted to give it a shot because I saw my other artist friends having a great time drawing with these crayons. And I was like, I want to know what all the fuss is about. So I just decided to give it a shot. I knew I was new at it, so it doesn't matter if I did well or not, so long as I could learn something. And I found something really satisfying about the process of prepping this material to work on it. But ultimately, they're very different methods of working, but I was still learning about chalk pastel when doing the crayon work. The crayon work requires a lot of time to build up, and it takes a long time. But then for the pastels, although it's a lot faster to just like put down a color, I realized that if I built it up, just like how I did the crayon, it ends up just looking great.
Yeah, for sure. I think that experimenting with different ways of drawing is really, really important. Now, another funny thing that actually Kat and I really share in common, you guys probably didn't even know this, but the two of us are actually classical musicians. And we're like a hardcore pianist. Like when people tell me I play piano, usually they play okay, and that's fine. But Kat was at my house playing on the grand piano, and you were like, like playing Rachmaninoff. I was like, oh man. And yet you're not a professional pianist, obviously. But
Right.
why does that matter in terms of being a well-rounded creative person?
I just feel that in terms of me being a musician and knowing a little bit more about music than a lot of other people, I guess, I just find different ways to be inspired personally. This is just my personal experience because when I hear a really good piece of music or if I play something that ends up being great, I just feel very different and it just makes me approach my art in a different way. For example, I made this one comic about, it's called The Biggest Man in the World. And it's about a really tall man just marveling at how huge the universe was. And I think I just felt really appreciative in that moment, mostly because I was just inspired by good music I was listening to and good spaces I was in. It just put me in a different mindset.
I had the same experience too, because actually, one thing that I think a lot of people think is very frustrating about art is that there are not clear-cut answers ever. Nothing is ever correct. But I played the oboe for many, many years in this orchestra, and I was like, yes, I played the right notes. It was so satisfying because there was no wondering about, oh, is this? I mean, certainly in music, you can do stuff with phrasing and dynamics and stuff like that. But in terms of playing the right notes, I loved it because I felt so accomplished. Now, another thing that helped me as a classical musician was just the discipline. I mean, you can't get good at an instrument without logging many, many hours of practicing and not just playing. There's a big difference between just playing your instrument and practicing. Do you think that helped you? And because I think your mom made you practice 2 hours every day.
Oh my gosh, my mom made me practice so many hours, more than 2 hours, Clara. far more than 2 hours. I really resented my mother when I was younger for forcing me to practice so long, so hard. But it made me realize that I can do it, and I'm grateful to her now. But because of that, I was able to push myself in terms of artwork. If it's really hard to focus on something for a very long time, but then once you develop that discipline, once you develop that habit, you can just keep going forever.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had so many moments playing the oboe where I just was so frustrated that, oh my God, I can't do this. I actually had a music teacher tell me this. Like, he said that if you want to be a professional musician, you have to be able to play a certain phrase that you're struggling with 10 times in a row, perfect. If you guys try it, I can do it like twice. And then inevitably something messes up. And he said that you have to learn to play it so well that you are incapable of playing it wrong. And just the concept of that blew my mind. And that's such a big difference in terms of playing an instrument and really being a professional. And so I think for me, it just made me realize, wow, there's a big difference between just playing something and actually really taking it seriously as a profession. We have a comment here from JDK. I've been playing flute for almost 20 years. I find so many similarities between learning visual art and learning music.
There is an
Really
aspect
cool.
of music that I do want to point out. It's performance, and it's very different from like having your artwork just out there in the open. So when you practice piano or you practice an instrument, eventually you're going to have to perform it in front of other people. In that very moment, you cannot mess up. If you mess up, what's up? Why would you spend so much time before practicing? And so that's a really different mindset. It's a really different stressful mindset, I guess, than creating art and then just having the artwork there. You're not having to be present. You don't have to mess up in the moment. You have a ton of time to prepare beforehand and then have your artwork. However, I do want to say that this performance aspect of music is informative of art later on, and also just as a person. Because Clara, I'm sure that performing, the anxiety of that has really helped you in terms of your teaching, in terms of you having to present your artwork, in terms of you having to do public speaking for that. What do you think?
I mean, for sure. I think when I teach, I really do think about it as a performance because everybody's looking at you. They're not, well, hopefully they're not thinking about, well, maybe they are thinking about something else. But I think that having those nerves and knowing how to deal with that, I mean, I find public speaking way easier than playing the oboe. I mean, I have some stressful performances where you play something wrong and the conductor gives you this really horrible demon face because you screwed up the solo. And actually, that's one of the main reasons I cannot be a professional musician. I can't take that level of stress. When I'm in the studio and I'm just making my thing, it's completely fine. It's like, okay, I just sit back, I go to the opening, I eat some crackers. I don't have to worry about that at all. So another thing that's interesting, and Kat and I discovered this before the stream, is we both have doctor friends who we love talking to about art. How did you meet your doctor friend?
I met my doctor friend. I met my doctor friend when I was studying in France because we happened to be taking the same French class. And we just connected, I guess. She's a lot older than me. She's a professor. And she has a really, really good sense of art. I feel like whenever I present work to her, I always have to be like more careful and more, I don't know, aware of what I present to her than I do to say like my brother or something like that. Because she can get things so fast. For instance, Clara, I know I give you a lot a lot of trouble about the really depressing themes in your artwork. And also, I don't know if anyone in the stream has noticed, but anytime Clara assigns a homework assignment for students, it's always a super negative theme. And it's so depressing, sad, whatever, whatever. But I was really made aware of that because of my doctor friend. I showed her some story I was making, and she was like, "Are you all right?" And I thought, oh, okay, interesting. I did send this comic to her, actually. This story is about depression. And she said that they were really good stories, but it was also really good to have other themes in my work because it's not good to always have a story about depression every single time. I do need some variety. What do you think, Clara?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're at the beginning of your career, you have to know what it's like to try to make a humorous piece of artwork. Because I did take a illustration concepts class, and we had this project where we were given a phrase, and the phrase was the world's silliest president. And I just went, oh, what am I going to do? I can't do this. Like, it was such a silly prompt. And I just didn't know what to do. And I think that's good. I think you need to be in a place where you are being pushed to do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. And I don't do humorous artwork. I pretty much never want to do that type of thing. But stretching your muscles in that way is a really good thing. And another thing I would say too is that it's good to take a vacation from yourself as an artist. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I just say to myself, you know what? I don't want to make anything finished for a while. I'm just going to say for the month of September, let's just play. You ever do that? Like really separate the experimentation, or are you more free flow?
I really separate it. Yeah, I can't. It's a totally different mindset. I'm a very different person from when I'm drawing versus when I'm just like chilling out reading comics. And I think it's fine. Whatever method works best for you. Some people need that switch. Other people are more free flowing. They just like take what comes at them. And that's also totally fine. I also do want to mention that, sorry, I do want to backtrack and say, yeah, Clara, a lot of your assignments are depressing and a lot of your work is as well. But I think you arrived to that conclusion that that works best and you've made the best work from that because you've had a lot of variety beforehand, that you didn't box yourself into one medium or one theme before.
Yeah, speaking of being boxed in, here's an assignment that I gave to Kat's class, and I believe the theme was claustrophobia. So there you go. We have another negative type of theme, and I think there's another one here. This one, which is called Scene of the Crime. So I said, illustrate some crime scene. And I think that, yeah, that's my personal sensibility. Mm-hmm. But you'll also study with professors who have very vague, abstract prompts. And I think those are important too. When you're really like, what do I do? Oh my goodness. Because in some ways, some of these prompts that are really structured, they're in some ways, quote, easier because you don't have to think as much. And sometimes when I give projects that are super open-ended, the students are like, what do I do? I don't understand. Do you think that's true, Kat?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. It's different for everyone, but I really need that structure. And I think that's why I performed well for your class, Clara. It's because you had these guidelines and you were very good at giving clear guidelines. Like, it can be anything, but you need to focus on these things. Like, you need to have these things included. So, for instance, for Scene of the Crime, I just knew, okay, it had to be black and white, has to be from life, and it needs to be a scene of crime. And so even though you think, oh, scene of a crime, that's so vague. No, actually that narrows it down so much. And that helps a lot in terms of like, there's a box now that you can think about. You can think outside of it or inside of it, but now there's a box. And that's what really mattered to me.
I would also say, you guys, that experimentation, it never ends. Mm-hmm. You don't graduate art school and say, I'm done. I don't need to try more stuff. And actually, that's one of the reasons I love working on Art Prof, because I have taught myself to do a lot of stuff on the fly. Like I learned how to use brush pens when I did my Taiwan tutorial, and I was not a marker person ever, because I just thought about markers as something that was more graphic. I taught myself how to carve balsa wood, which I'd never done before, and I really spent time troubleshooting that. And then actually my TA taught me how to make these lotus fold artist books. And I ended up assigning it actually to one of my summer classes. And then actually I've also learned jewelry techniques. And I was like, wow, you don't need fancy supplies? Because Kat, after you took your jewelry class, I know it was a little hard because you didn't have access to all the supplies, right?
Right. I think basically I didn't have access to a ventilation booth and soldering materials, but through the jewelry metalsmithing class, I kind of developed like this bravery. Like I can do whatever I think I want to do, and it doesn't matter if the materials are holding me back. I can find a way around it. And I think that's also what I meant earlier when I said, "Oh, jewelry can also be like scrappy, experimentational," and it's still very valid use of the medium. And I think that you've also learned something about that through your jewelry cuff making, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't know what Annalise was doing, but I liked watching her do it. And then I tried it myself later on. I was like, okay, I can do this. This is going to happen. I mean, it takes time to do that. Art Prof has a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. And we would love it if you guys would leave us a rating and a review. Please join Kat and I on Discord after the stream. In about 5 minutes, we will be in the post live streams channel. And if you are not in the Discord, please join us. The invite link is in the video description below. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and join the Art Prof family. And thank you so much to our top Patreon supporters who make everything possible, keep the lights on here at Art Prof. Thank you to everybody who participated, made comments in the stream, asked questions. You guys really enrich our conversations. Thanks, guys, for watching. We will see you next time. Bye.